Padres Hot Tub is brought to you by Estate Leak Detection and Plumbing. Our man Wally, available to you. Take this number and save it in your phone. 619-300-7203. You just don't know when a plumbing emergency is going to strike at your house. The only thing you know for sure is that when it does happen, it's going to be super inconvenient. It's going to happen right when you don't want it to happen because you never want it to happen. But more often than not, it's going to be right when you are getting ready for something or you have to be prepared in some way. You're going to want to call someone who's local, who's professional, reliable, and trustworthy. And we can vouch personally for Wally at Estate Leak Detection and Plumbing, Chris.
So here's the thing, y'all. When I started hearing from my friends about this whole podcast thing I was doing, they were asking, how can I help out? What do you do this? And Wally brought up the idea of supporting the show, and I immediately went, perfect. This is exactly how I like to endorse products. Stuff that's real, that you can trust, that I myself, if in the situation, would pick up that number and dial it because I could depend on the service, on the product that was going to happen. So it's absolutely thrilling for me that Wally is sponsoring us for another go-around. He is our guy, and we want him to be yours too, because sincerely, earnestly, it's going to help you out when you're in a situation that sucks.
And when it does, just remember, you've got this number saved in your phone. Here it is again, 619-300-7203. Welcome to the Padres Hot Tub, everybody. Craig Elston, Chris Reed, Rafi Cantor, back with you. We've got a special guest, David Jay, coming up a little bit later. It's our trade deadline special. Hooray! It's August 1st, and the Padres bought. They bought and they bought and they bought again. They didn't sell at all, and they are going to embrace the long shot. They're going to embrace the iconic, definitive rally song of Padres Hot Tub and the San Diego Padres, the anthem of the Lost Boys, I Still Believe, by Tim Capello, and they will move forward, or so we hope. Guys, I got a text today from John Gennaro, and he said, there's a problem with Padres Hot Tub. And I'm like, oh no, what now? And he said, you haven't started every show saying that the team's 0-10 in extra innings. And I'm like, well, that just happened yesterday.
Yeah.
So this was my first chance. So I'm starting the show, John. The Padres are 0-10 in extra innings. They are in now a spot that's beyond the impossible. It's into the mythical and the fantastical. It's making me believe in things I don't believe in. They're 6-18 in one-run games. They're 10-16 against last place teams in Major League Baseball. The trifecta of misery, guys. But in a year that has been filled with gut punches, I think Monday night's game, look, just put it in the bin next to the other 19 gut punches. Put it in the bin.
Believing in things you don't believe in, Craig.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that.
Just that squares could be circles, and but there's potentialities beyond the visible realm, like certainly not curses over there.
Curses!
Get off of that for sure. Definitely not that, but short of that. It's just amazing. Like, for the Padres to lose last night, I thought about this morning. For that game to tumble against them, they needed to have their top defense give up an unearned run, and then they needed to load the bases with nobody out in the top of a 10th inning and not score a run. Then they needed their Gold Glove third baseman to drop the easy out on the bunt with the throw to get the Manfred man out at third base. Like, all of those things had to happen in a parlay
something. Yeah,
in order for them to lose.
Juan Soto being thrown out by an approximate
and I am
year.
forgetting something.
Yeah,
100%.
And then us challenging it.
The most hilarious
well, that was
play
just fun.
Yeah.
and the quickest challenge in worldwide sports history.
It was literally. You're
challenging it. You're challenging it. The ruling has been confirmed. But
it was a fuck you challenge from Bob Melvin of like, you're gonna call us for that shit in San Francisco. Okay, like you better call it now. And then it was a fuck you right back from the umpires.
Petty.
Yeah. Could have we could have used that challenge, but I guess it didn't end up mattering because they did an umpire's review of Machado's tag anyway. So and they ruled that safe. So
yeah, I mean, if you tell me, hey, Padres are going to extra innings, you say, oh, they're going to lose, and then you go, but here's the deal though. They're in Coors Field.
Yeah.
They're going to load the bases with nobody out in the top of the inning. And in the bottom of the inning, they're going to throw out the Manfred man at third base as the first play of the inning. Like, those two things are going to happen. It's over. We're going to score at least 2 runs, 2, 3, 4 runs. And once we've thrown out the Manfred man at third base, the Rockies, it's very improbable they're going to come back. Oh, but Machado's going to have the ball not kicked out of his glove.
Fall.
Just come out of his glove. Like, just emerge. Probably because it's wet and soggy and sloppy and everything else. But just have it squirt out of his glove. But yeah, the Soto
probably because Dick Monfort, while Manny Machado was visiting, took a strand of hair from his head, along with 2 eyes of newt, and boiled them in fucking a can of what's the Blue Moon? The Blue Moon brewed at Coors Field, and then he poured it over the third base bag.
So okay, this is
Rafi. We can save us.
We can do our Abbott and Costello, like, there's no curses. Of course there's curses, like, thing, but one of the things that we have both agreed on is that if you think that you are cursed, then you are cursed. You know what I mean? And from like a mental standpoint. And there was something about going into last night's game, knowing the importance of that win in the trade deadline, knowing it's the first time all season when they would get 4 wins in a row. And there was some sort of mental seal around that. It felt like just watching that game, because it was mental errors. It was between Xander missing that easy catch and transfer at second base, between Matt Williams sending Juan Soto. I don't know if it's I don't know who we want to put that.
You can't say that and not have me laugh.
It's Williams, man. It's Williams.
Yeah,
it's 100% on Matt Williams.
And I thought, because when they showed, because the way that the camera works, they show the ball is hitting the outfield, they show the outfielder, then they show Soto rounding third. And I'm thinking, in the time between when the camera angle changed, the center fielder must have dropped the ball or bobbled it or something. Because there's no way.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, and then they switch cameras, and then the catcher already has the ball. And then Soto, I don't know. I'm not a fan of guys should run hard and railroad guys. Like, there's a reason they changed the rules. That's how people get hurt. Soto's our multi-million-dollar man. I don't agree with the idea that he should just railroaded him. But I did think it was funny that he kind of just hugged the catcher when he got there. It was just like, okay, bring it in. So it took but you're right, Craig. It took all of those things in a parlay. Yeah. And it felt like it was just, they're getting more creative with the way that they lose.
The reverse 2010 scenario remains very much in play. They continue to improbably, implausibly, almost ridiculously lose games. They lose games that they have no business losing. They lose games in strange and uncomfortable ways. But our guys at Letters to AJ just really are not missing of late. They have done some great work. And one of their, I think it was second to last, most recent columns had a stat that I thought was so revealing that nobody has been talking about, which is that Josh Hader has saved 24 of 28 games this year, which is great. And the rest of the bullpen has had 18 save opportunities, and they're 2 for 18. 2 for 18.
It's unbelievable.
2 for 18. So How does a team with a plus 60 run differential wind up 3 games under 500 and 0-10 in extra innings, 6-18 in one-run games? How do they get to 6-18 in one-run games? They've blown every one of those 7th, 8th inning Nick Martinez, whatever situations.
Yeah.
They've blown.
Because the save opportunity is 3 runs within the last 3 innings. Yeah.
Yeah. And Martinez is 5 blown saves.
Well, I mean,
he's 1 for 6.
when you're 2 in 44 or whatever they are when trailing after the 7th, that all fits. Like, it's a team that doesn't have the go for the jugular, not to, go on tropes, but the winning instinct, not the killer instinct, just the winning instinct. And in a season where there's 8 teams vying for the 3 spots or whatever, we've said it before. I've heard you guys say it before. Every game matters. Last night was a kick in the middle of the human body. I did not like it. It reinforces all my thoughts about where this team's future could go. And then we had today.
Well, isn't it a thing though, guys? And it really needs to be said. When the Padres get kicked in the nuts, when the Padres have a heartbreak game, they've bounced back way more often than not and put up another solid performance. And I mean, really the only series where I felt it spiral this year, honestly, that Giants series, where it was the blown save on Monday and the blown save on Tuesday, and then it was the call on Wednesday, and it just felt like it spiraled from one unlucky result to another. That Pirate series was bad. The other Pirate series was bad, but there's always within those flecks of optimism of, I can't believe that Tatis ball didn't go out. Last night's game, it takes a 5 shit parlay for the team to lose, like almost an impossible run for them to
You can make a
lose.
lot of money betting on 5 shit parlays for the Padres this year.
I mean, you really could. But on Tuesday, the team decided to buy. And as we are recording, the Padres are winning late against Colorado. So we'll just leave it at that and we'll deal with this game momentarily. But it was a game that the Padres played very shorthanded because the guys that they traded for aren't here, probably won't be here for the Wednesday game in Colorado either. Maybe 1, maybe 2. We'll see. Probably they'll be there for the Dodgers series on Friday. But the Padres made 3 trades today, guys. 1 early, 2 late. We will get to tonight's result once it's done. But I want to get into the trade stuff. And just remember, John Gennaro, that was for you. We started a trade deadline show talking about the team being 0-10 in extra innings. OG rights still in play. Okay. So here's how I want to do
Doomer
this.
tip of the hat.
Right. Here's how I want to do this here tonight. I want to compartmentalize it a little bit so that both for listeners, if you want to get to the part you want to get to, you can get to it. But secondly, I want to take on each of these segments independently and then get to a conclusion at the end of it, as opposed to kind of like wildly striking on each one. So we're going to start with who the Padres are getting. We're going to go from that to who the Padres' new acquisitions will replace and how that'll impact the job shares for the club going forward. Then we'll be joined by a special guest, our Madfriars regular, Ben Davey, unavailable today. We're going to the Madfriars bullpen. We're getting another one of their aces out of the pen. David Jay is going to join us. He's a regular on the John and Jim show. I've talked to David over the years. I'm sure he will offer some sardonic humor along the way. But in that segment, we'll focus very specifically on who the Padres gave up in their trades today, and also on the impacts that today's trade will have on next year's draft. So we'll discuss that with David Jay coming up. Then we'll wrap up discussing the overall deadline in terms of who the teams that the Padres are vying against, what they did, how they improved, so that we can try and think about the Padres' improvement versus the relative improvement of all the teams that they need to pass and or hold off in the standings. So at the very end, we'll try and ask and answer the question, how much better are we? And do we think it's going to be enough? So there it is. It's an ambitious show. It's a big show. Within it, we'll have a result that's looking ever more Padres, as they're leading now by 3 in the 9th inning. And hopefully, well, I mean, they've got Josh Hader. I'm 91% willing to put that one in the bank. So with that, on to who the Padres got. 1 trade early, 2 trades late. Padres make a deal with the Pirates early, 3 minor leaguers for Rich Hill and Ji-Man Choi. And until like 3:10, that was it for the Padres. It looked like that was going to be the one move until before the trade deadline. The trade deadline had seemingly elapsed. And I was truly, honestly, guys, ready to come on here and rip AJ Preller for not doing enough, for pushing the Padres really not very much closer to a playoff berth with his move today of Ji-Man Choi and Rich Hill. But then those post 3 p.m., those 2:59 and 59-second entries that have to get processed through the office before they can get released, got released. And we found out that the Padres made a trade with the Florida Marlins, Miami Marlins, where they got for the big league team right away, Garrett Cooper, first baseman, DH, right-handed batter, soon to be free agent, just like Choi and Hill. And also out of the minor leagues, reliever Sean Reynolds. And that was for Ryan Weathers. And the last one of all, I think the last one that came through the transom at MLB today, was the Padres receiving the Royals closer, Scott Barlow, in a trade in which they sent 2 arms to Kansas City, Henry Williams and Jesus Rios. So in total, the Padres are going to get 4 big league players and 1 minor leaguer to add to the roster. And guys, I want to start with the last trade because Scott Barlow is not a rental. He is under control for next year. He is a free agent in 2025. And Barlow, who has not had a good year overall this season in terms of ERA, his FIP is about the same as it was the last 2 years when he pitched at a pretty elite level. And he's still striking out about 11 guys per 9 innings. I think Barlow is the most important guy the Padres added today. What do you guys think?
Absolutely agree. The surface numbers for this year aren't great, but like you said, if you go and kind of dive into everything else, his expected ERA is just a 3.82 against an actual ERA of 5.35. So you could say he's got a bit unlucky. His hard hit percentage, meaning the amount of hard hits he gives up, is his career lowest this year. It's at 28.3%. The biggest thing, same thing, by the way, with exit velocity, which we would expect. Those things go hand in hand. The biggest thing right now is he's walking a ton of guys, which he hasn't really done. He's currently walking 12.5% of batters, which is in the bottom 9% of the league. It's also his worst career number. And I guess the question is basically, who do you think Scott Barlow is? Do you think that he is who he is this year, or do you think that he is who he's been the past 4 or 5 years? And the other point, which was bandied about much in our Discord today, is who do you think he is once Ruben Niebla gets his hands on him? Which I think is the really interesting question and something I'm very excited for. Scott Barlow was a very early adopter of the sweeper, so that's obviously very exciting. I'm more intrigued by the downstream, what this indicates. To me, this indicates that a Josh Hader extension is not necessarily imminent. You're already paying Robert Suarez a lot of money for next year in hopes that he would become the closer. You have someone who certainly has been of 9th inning caliber historically who's there. Obviously from a lefty-righty standpoint, Hader offers something different. But I would not be surprised if this meant that Josh Hader got a qualifying offer and that was it from the Padres. So I'm really excited by this one. And this was this trade where I was like, this was the most no-brainer of what we gave up versus what we got. I know we're looking at it as a whole, but this one was okay, yeah, let's go.
Chris, breaking it down a little bit further on Scott Barlow, he is the quintessential hard righty. He's a right-hander with a hard fastball and a sweeper slider that's tough on right-handed batters. Left-handed batters are going to get a much better look at him. They're going to be able to see that sweeper coming, and the sweeper's going to break into their hitting plane, and they're going to give him more trouble. His career OPS differential between facing a lefty and a righty is 736 to the lefty, 609 to the righty. Those numbers in smaller samples are even more pronounced this year, like into the 500s and 900s. I'll pull it back up. But he's even been more pronounced. And while that makes him only partially useful, yeah, he's allowed a 504 OPS to righties this year, 913 to left-handers. I also think for a manager like Bob Melvin, Chris, it's okay. Scott Barlow is a very easy pitcher to use. Line up the appearance that's got a minimum of 2 right-handed batters in it and let him go.
Sure, he's a nice tool to have coming out of the shed, especially when we consider, that wonderful stat from Archie Sinfracco. We've seen a lot of 7th, 8th high leverage situations melt down on us. And it was the team's biggest place of need. Dude's sliders on Baseball Savant are sexy. There's the walks, as Rafi pointed out. If you scroll down into his pitches, you'll see his fastball kind of gets slammed. But that's all right if you're, especially in a year where you're not locating it well and you're walking guys. That means you're giving them a lot of, 1-0, 2-0 seeds right down the middle. And if you're not playing the Padres, those pitches tend to get kind of ripped. It's a nice key. Yeah, it's a nice puzzle piece that the team desperately needed, and maybe we'll see some of these closer games go our way as a result.
Everyone else is a rental, so it's really exciting to talk about next year, Rafi, for Scott Barlow. He's getting paid $5.3 million after arbitration this season. He's having his worst season outside of a Padres go on a run situation where Josh Hader is cooked and then the team has a save situation. Scott Barlow's probably got his last save of the year. Like maybe he gets 1 or 2 more saves the rest of the year. More likely is he's pitching the 7th inning for this team, or the 6th or 7th in a situational manner is the way he should be properly. The way he should be properly employed is between the 5th and 7th in a situational manner at any point where there are multiple right-handed batters coming into the game. But point being, Padres, I think, Rafe, are going to have an opportunity to sign him next year at an arbitration figure that won't be too onerous. It should be around where it is this year.
Absolutely. And I mean, if Josh Hader is getting paid close to $15 million this year, and they do decide to scale down from that, then that's $10 million in savings potentially right there. I mean, more, because Josh Hader will be getting paid more next year wherever he goes in free agency. I will disagree with you, though. I don't necessarily think it's the last save he's going to get, because if we have a situation like last night's game where our main guys are completely taxed, and like you said, you brought up earlier, we're 16 and 18 or whatever insane bullshit that is in games that Josh Hader hasn't saved or hasn't pitched, I should say, like, he would be theoretically the next guy in that pecking order after him and Suarez and maybe Wilson. You could make the argument either way, I think, depending on how Barlow comes in when he pitches. I think Wilson certainly earned the right to be higher in the pecking order so far. But again, this is a guy that's coming in who has closing experience. And I think a manager like Bob Melvin is going to value that. So I'm really intrigued how they deploy it this year down the stretch run, Craig.
Yeah, well, and maybe that is the last point. And it's good you brought it up, Rafi, and I do agree with you. Like, yeah, it's wrong for me to say. I said 1 or 2 more, maybe, but that situation.
He said he's got his last one.
I said he could get maybe 1 or 2
You
more.
hedged. You hedged. You did both. You said
yeah,
both.
Yeah, I said last one, maybe 1 or 2 more. But the way he could get one is in a game like last night, because one of the things that I know Padre fans very realistically felt in terms of dread when the game went to extra innings was it was a game where the team had no Hader, nor Suarez, nor Wilson. And so it was like, okay, well, even if we take the lead, who's going to possibly hold this? Is Nick Martinez going to pick this day to get the lucky ball, or Tim Hill? So Barlow gives you one more guy, and one more guy can be the difference when you're trying to chain wins together as opposed to stopping and starting.
Yeah. So I think this is the theme kind of for all of the trades that were made today, which, we're going to evaluate like just all of them as a whole at the end of the show. So stick around for that, because I do have thoughts about the whole everything we did today. But from just a pure buying standpoint, it's about extension. It's about extending the lineup, and it's about extending our bullpen, and it's about depth. And that is what excites me, if I'm looking at it from a half full perspective about today, is that really like there's that feeling that we get either when we're getting to the 7 or 8 spot in the order, or when we're getting to the 5th or 6th inning and our starter's taxed and we need to bring in from the bullpen, where we're all throwing up our hands on our head and we're saying, now what? Who's going to come in? Who's going to hit? What are we going to do? It's the 9th inning and the bases are loaded, and who's going to pinch hit? Oh shit, it's Taylor Cowley, or Coley. Is it Coles Mountain or Cowles Mountain? We're gonna
right. Yeah,
it's like
it's Cowles Mountain and Taylor Colway.
It's Coles Mountain. Yeah, it's Coles Mountain.
Okay,
though.
all right.
Well, I mean, okay, this is for banter. We'll get into this. We'll
fair.
get into some San Diego history. But yeah, it's about extension. That's all I'm trying to say.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Well, Chris, here's the very last thing as we move off Scott Barlow. According to his Baseball Reference page, Scott Barlow's nickname is Scoots Magoots.
Jesus Christ. He's coming to town with that friggin' nickname when we're bringing Dick Mountain?
We got Dick Mountain and Scoots Magoots on the same day.
We got Dick Mountain, and he's going to put Scoots Magoots in the locker next to him?
Yeah.
Come on, AJ.
Hey, Scoots.
Got to do better nicknames than this.
Hey,
what's Liam Hendrick's nickname?
I don't think it's Scoots Magoots. I don't know.
No. All right. We're going off of years of control being an asset and not nicknames. We're out of my league.
Fair.
Out of my breath.
Let's go to I'm working in reverse order. Let's go to the Miami trade. Garrett Cooper isn't exactly what I thought the Padres would be going for, but when combined, gentlemen, with G-Man Choi, who we'll get to momentarily, it feels like this is now your DH platoon going forward, with Cooper having the flexibility to certainly play first base, at least maybe a corner outfield, right field situation to push Tatis into center if you faced a super hard lefty going down the stretch. So a little bit of flexibility with Garrett Cooper, who is a career 271 hitter. He's at least not just an all or nothing type hitter.
He has got that median first base OPS look about him, which we're all about around here. Like, we'll take it. What I thought was exciting about this, Craig, Rafi, is that Garrett Cooper was kind of like last year's Kyle Manzardo. Like, this is a guy that Padres fans have kind of wanted in the clubhouse for a while. I've been seeing his name bandied about for at least a deadline now. So happy we got him. And I think this trade's kind of more about addition by subtraction for the fans. In terms of who's going away than who's coming.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just worth emphasizing just how bad our first base position has been, like how little production we have gotten. And I know people are going to look at Garrett Cooper's Fangraphs page and say, oh, he's got a 97 WRC plus this year. That's not even league average. And first base is a position where we need to be getting more. But even that raises the bar. Just a little bit. I'm going to be really intrigued about the different combinations of lefties and righties we roll out on given days and how we arrange the first base and DH platoon. Because the one trap I don't want to get into that we literally just had to work our way out of was having 2 guys for a DH position, for instance. So it's like we've made these trades, how are they going to kind of rearrange the Tetris of fitting all these guys in? But if there's someone who does love the righty-lefty platoon game, it's Bob Melvin, and he certainly has a nice, shiny new set of tools to arrange his lineup, Craig.
Garrett Cooper career is 40 points better OPS lefty to righty, so he's pretty standard right-handed batter. But this year, he's been very good against left-handed pitching in limited work, of course. 70 plate appearances, but a 349 average, 871 OPS, 136 OPS plus in terms of right-handers facing left-handers. So pretty solid numbers for Garrett Cooper. And the thing that gets me excited, and actually, let me look up what his pinch hit numbers are. I think they'll have that. Yep, as a pinch hitter, he's 3 for 5 this year, which, hey, look, is better than nothing.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, with a home run. Nonetheless, I think Cooper is a really solid addition to this team, and he's going to be hitting instead of Matt Carpenter or Matt Batten or a catcher in an important situation. I think that's good news for the Padres. This wasn't the only player they got in the Miami trade, though. They get this minor league reliever, Sean Reynolds.
And he really is big, Craig.
He is.
He's big.
He is a big boy. Sean Reynolds is 6'8", 250 pounds. He's 25 years old. He is a Southern Californian. He's from Redondo Beach. And he was a 4th rounder in 2016, drafted as a hitter for the Marlins. And he was terrible. I mean, he was absolutely terrible. From 2016 to 2019, he hit 178, 6 seasons across 4 different levels of minor league baseball. And so he shut her down and converted to become a pitcher. And he became a pitcher in 2021. And he has started to figure it out. And in 2023, between AA and AAA, Sean Reynolds, has a 2.77 ERA, 54 strikeouts in 48 2/3 innings against 35 hits. He's walked 23, which is certainly not great, but he's allowed only 2 home runs. So swing and miss stuff, very few home runs allowed. 25 years old, fully controllable, hasn't made his major league debut. On a day when the Padres up some 40 EV prospects, Rafi, they get one back here in Sean Reynolds, and this could be a kid that pitches for the team next year.
Yeah, I absolutely love a Rick Ankiel, or I guess this is a reverse Rick Ankiel, but like anyone who like starts as a pitcher and then becomes a hitter, or starts as a hitter and then becomes a pitcher, I especially when they succeed and do well, it's such a cool story. So I'm certainly rooting for this guy. It also makes what we gave up in that trade, which we'll get to later, in Ryan Weathers, it makes it make a little bit more sense that we're getting someone back. Not necessarily of Ryan Weathers' caliber, but more of a Jackson Wolf caliber, which again is, we'll get to later. Yeah, I mean, Eric Longenhagen in the write-up that he did for Fangraphs said that he has a 55 grade fastball, 55 grade slider, and he has a changeup that's not super great. The command is the biggest question. But he sits 92, 96, and he tops out at 98. And again, like one of those big ass guys who gets extended, going to home plate, throwing hard, probably is going to throw a little bit harder, especially once Ruben Niebla gets his hands on him. I'm really excited by it, and it's just more of that depth and extension that I was talking about, Craig.
Yeah, Chris, your thoughts on between Cooper and Reynolds, what we get back from the Marlins?
I dig that they're both Southern California guys. Cooper's from Torrance, Reynolds is from Redondo. It's just a fun little thing that makes these guys a little bit more relatable, get our hooks into them a little bit. It's a story San Diegans know pretty well, seeing the Southern Californians come here and thrive. Fun to see him be a late bloomer. I know, Rafi, I've seen your Matt Bush poster. I understand your affinity for these guys. Hopefully we can see a better, higher, more sustained trajectory for our guy. And I like, and we're going to talk about, I love how this year it's felt like when one piece went out, another piece came in. There's no like weird like Adam Frazier thing happening. It all feels very balanced. It feels very focused and very zen, boys.
So let's get to the first trade last. And that was the 2-player acquisition from the Pittsburgh Pirates, receiving G-Man Choi and Rich Hill. And I think it's usually been reported in that reverse order of Rich Hill and G-Man Choi, but I want to do it with what I think is importance, and that's G-Man Choi coming to San Diego. A lot, because he's hitting 206 this year, a 224 on base percentage, 731 OPS, 91 OPS plus. Not a lot. But G-Man Choi was hurt early in the season, and then he missed 2.5 months of the season, and he came back at the start of July. And since the start of July, when he's come back, he's hit quite well, guys. He's had an OPS over 900 since then. Mix that in with the fact I've got his career batting splits open. I talked about getting bench depth. In his career, in 77 plate appearances as a pinch hitter, G-Man Choi is hitting 357, 520, 589 for an 1109 OPS and a 189 OPS plus, and a couple of home runs as well. So this is a player that really helps, I think, the Padres' versatility. He can be their regular strong side platoon DH, but in a circumstance where the Padres roll it out a little bit differently and Camposano or Sanchez is DHing, Choi is going to be a valuable bat off the bench as well, guys.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by those pinch hitting numbers. I mean, they are truly incredible and exceptional for anyone in this position, but he was spending the vast majority of his Major League Baseball career with the Tampa Bay Rays, who are a team that know how to deploy their hitters in the exact optimal situations. And for G-Man Choi, that certainly was no exception. And on that note, he was platooned a ton when he was with the Rays and was strictly facing right-handed pitchers. And, famously, during the World Series and stuff, the Rays were, pinch hitting for their 3-hitter if the matchup was the right one. So I'm really excited by G-Man Choi, as excited as one can be for G-Man Choi, for a couple of reasons. One, he's put up, decent numbers so far this year. His expected numbers are really freaking good. His WOBA right now is just a kind of a paltry 301, but his expected WOBA is up to 362, and his expected WOBA on contact is up to 555, which is like you're getting into like Tatis territory, which is basically just the expected WOBA on balls that are put in play. So he is absolutely mashing the ball so far in his return and just hasn't gotten the results. So I'm intrigued by not only, what he does here, but also how we deploy him, because he's certainly someone who, I've seen the GIF thousands of times of him doing the splits, playing first base. Yeah, he's certainly someone who, from an eye test standpoint, can certainly cover the bag defensively, and we'll definitely get some play. I don't know how much it threatens the Jake Cronenworth at first base experiment, because of course they're both left-handed hitters. So presumably G-Man Choi, if he is playing first base, would mean Jake Cronenworth is not playing first base. So I am curious to see how the team navigates that. But it was, again, one of the things we talked about, a need that needed to be addressed, and it was addressed, Greg.
Yeah, and Chris, and we'll get more into who these guys are going to replace momentarily, but I think this trade really exemplifies something that we have been calling for on this show for weeks, which is not going for a big swing, not going to add a superstar or a superstar salary or a superstar commitment to the San Diego Padres. It was merely to take the spots on the roster that have been absolute black holes and try and convert them into average to slightly above average positions. And G-Man Choi, who in his career has a 339 on base percentage, a 772 OPS. In his career, he's got 67 home runs. He's a deployable bat in Major League Baseball. And I think that is something that couldn't have been said for either of the guys who've been trying to DH for the Padres so far this year.
That is true. We talked a lot about roster spots 21 through 26, right? And voila, here we go today. They've made a move for, I think it's 4 big leaguers, or is it 5 big leaguers in a minor league? Either way.
No, 4 big leaguers, yeah, and then Reynolds, who knows?
That's exactly what was on order. Our biggest fears episode, we kind of worried exactly what would come to pass with the team itself. But the biggest part of our fear was born of desperation in the front office, leading to our biggest prospects going away and the team's future getting mortgages. And this was resolutely not that. The Padres got about 30 WAR today, Craig. Better, which, if you'll notice, Juan Soto's WAR last year was 23. So we got a Juan Soto and a third today for way less than we got than we paid last year.
Wait, I want to see the math on that one. What?
Yeah,
can we show?
Right
Can you show your numbers,
guys? It's on an envelope right here.
That's
so
on the back of a Five Guys.
He's got 17.
Wrapper.
I don't need it. Five Guys. Don't you try to take my Southern California card away from me, you Dodger lover. 17 for Rich Hill. Rich Hill's got 17 of those. And then the rest of the guys have like 5. I'll throw away the envelope. You don't need to check my work. But they didn't give up Jackson Merrill. He's still a Padre. Ethan Salas always was going to be a Padre. But the Dylan Leskos, guys that we want to see contribute to the team in the future. Our window may be short with guys in their prime. We want to get the primes out of Manny, out of Tatis, out of Bogarts, out of Musgrove. These are our guys in their use that we can expect all-star performances out of. But that's for 3 or 4 years. And beyond that, we need a team. So the team did not get sold. The future looks bright after today, and I think it went pretty darn good by those standards that you point out there, Craig. Rafi, you got 2 first basemen. I got no outfielders. You got 2 first basemen. You should be thrilled.
Yeah. I'm stoked. And listen, were you going to transition to Dick Mountain?
Yeah. Just,
have to.
Here's the first guy that everyone's going to mention. And to me, it's the last guy on the list. And that's Rich Hill. Rich Hill is at the end of his rope. I've seen him like 3 times this year. It's barely there. I know when this trade came up, Prakota, who was at today's ball game, and by the way, now, you all knew it, but now we all know Padres won 8-5. He had a field day putting up all the advanced metrics showing that Rich Hill's been, I think, at its most favorable extrapolation, one of the 15 worst pitchers in baseball this year. And I think there were ways to cast it as like the 4th worst, but regardless, he hasn't been good. You know what you're getting. But Rafe, I'm going back to the Suggestion Box podcast right out of the All-Star break, and the Padres have listened to suggestion number 1. There will be no more Weathers innings. There will be no more Kinnear innings, and there should
be. Hey, Craig dropped off, and I want to point out that Reese Kinnear had Tommy John surgery. I don't think we've said that out loud on the show. Just by the way,
we have not. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
but
true.
Yeah, there's gonna be no more Weathers innings. And listen, Rich Hill, for all his foibles, does have 1.2 more F4 this year than Ryan Weathers does. That's a matter of also getting more playing time. But yeah, listen, we should not make anything too exciting out of Rich Hill, other than he's now the immaculate grid undisputed
That's
Lord.
exactly,
Like
the first thing I thought.
they need to have
when
some
I
sort
saw
of
that.
some sort of pregame ceremony or something where they make him like king of the grid or something. Like
Yeah,
I
they got to
would love
put
that.
his face in the middle of
Yeah.
Padres, whoever.
Yeah.
Did you say so I said this. He's averaged about 1 WAR a year per year of his 19-year career or whatever it is. It's not that great, even when he was in his prime.
A little more than that, yeah. So his 21.3 career F4, and he's played for 19 seasons, I think. So a little more than one.
That was a
Go
B
ahead.
WAR, 5 guys.
How dare you?
rapper.
How dare you? You're out here saying, "Oh, don't call me a Five Guys guy." Then you're just throwing out B WAR, like just dropping bombs. Okay,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay,
Exactly.
Anyway, really quickly back to
You've
Rick.
got seasoned fries in your seat right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Be honest.
Yeah, you're licking your fingers over there.
burrito.
Oh God,
and the
dead.
camera got moved.
He's dead.
In terms of Rich Hill, I don't think of anything except as a human sponge. He's just there to soak up innings, and any innings that he's throwing, like you said, are certainly not going to Ryan Weathers anymore, and certainly not going to Reese Kinnear, but not going to your Matt Waldrons of the world, despite my best wishes. They're not going to your random. They're not going to your Pedro Avilas, for instance.
Right.
They are going to Rich Hill, and he's nothing more than a sponge and a shield for this team, and making sure our arms stay healthy for hopefully a deep run into the season, Craig.
It's one more guy, Chris. And when Rich Hill is pitching, that again, it means none of those guys are pitching in a situation where the bullpen's depleted. Now it's going to be that there's a Barlow available instead of it going to a Honeywell. Today, I think Honeywell did his, courageous hurrah, last goodbye for the club, trying to soak multiple innings. I don't think there's any reason to believe that Rich Hill's going to be any better version of himself than he's been. But what he's been is a guy that when he's on can go through the lineup one time and look really sharp. And
yeah,
honestly, for what you're asking for, which is a 6th starter, literally a 6th starter, meaning could fill in for the 5th. Walker's supposed to be coming back reasonably soon. Maybe that he and Drew Pomerantz are waving to us from the back platform of a train, receding in the distance. Right
they're
now.
In the great bullpen in the sky, Craig.
But in theory, Michael Walker is coming back, and Rich Hill is there to be an emergency exception. And then you could piggyback him with Nick Martinez, because let's start to transition into the second part of this, which is how these guys fit into the team. And this is what gets me excited, because when you look at Rich Hill, he's replacing Ryan Weathers on this team. And Ryan Weathers is a kid that I've just, I'm looking forward to Miami proving me wrong. But, at which point his mom, like I'll send her a card or something. But I don't think he's a major league pitcher. Like, I don't think he's a big leaguer. So Rich Hill's been a big leaguer for 19 years. And if you're going to ask one guy in a pressure situation to get through a good lineup, like one time, and the Padres are going to be seeing nothing but good lineups the next month, but they're going to see Arizona 7 times, like in 10 games. And if Rich Hill can get in there and snap out the Corbin Carrolls and Jake McCarthy's and Perdomos of the world, and make the Diamondbacks right-handed, I think that's going to be a useful thing for this team going forward.
As a main, as just one thing, Rich Hill is not that delicious. As a part of the stew, I think he's going to be quite tasty. We haven't even gotten into the tropes of what a 19-year-old veteran of Major League Baseball brings to the clubhouse. Like, it's not going to be a team-wide thing. Like, Rich Hill's not going to make them winners when he walks in, but his impact with some of the younger guys, some of these relievers that are up for their rookie seasons, I think having a dude like that just around really matters, because we hear it. We hear it from young guys how much that matters. And it's the right type of person to be taking up the roster spot. We know where he is this year, as you said, Craig. It's not amazing. What my whole takeaway from watching him pitch is he's good for like 2 or 3 innings, and you nailed it one time through the lineup. If he gets you 2, that's amazing. I want to give a big old golf clap to Pedro Avila tonight, keeping the Padres into it. This is a polite gallery one, so I've got a couple hundred spectators. We're all clapping for you, Pedro. Great job in Coors Field. Getting did he get through 5?
4.
That's fine. Great job, dude. Couple times through the lineup. And if Rich Hill can do that with Nick Martinez, all of a sudden you got a full, complete major league starter. And that's what they need, man. They just need, not guys up there looking terrified and sweaty. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's my job, Padres pitchers.
Well, you brought it up just really quickly to tonight's game because it did finish while we got into the trade deadline discussion. Everything that the Padres needed to have happened today. They needed their big hitters to power them to a win because all these fringe dudes were on the way. And the fringe dudes that are about to be replaced weren't about to step into the lineup and succeed tonight. So they needed something like a Juan Soto 2-homer, 4 RBI game. They got it. They needed something like a big Tatis RBI double. They got the team going, and then a ground out. They got a run in. So they needed to see Tatis get a little juice today, and he did. And Pedro Avila, if this team, we've talked about all the losses that we could look back on and regret. I hope we can start to collect a couple wins that we can look back on and get excited about. And if this team winds up making it into the playoffs by a game, that first inning, when Avila was 100% on the ropes, he had given up a run. He had no command of either one of his breaking pitches whatsoever. He had loaded the bases. He was over 30 pitches thrown in the inning. A slam puts the Padres down 5-0 right out of the jump. And pretty much the way we've seen this team this year probably cashes the game out. And he came up with a breaking ball after being bad the whole inning. He came up with a big count breaking ball to get out of that inning with just 1 run allowed. I think it was Montero that he struck out. And I was running at the YMCA at that moment on the treadmill, and I pumped my fist. I felt like that was just a gigantic out, because the one thing you didn't want to see was that game get away from the San Diego Padres. And they won literally with pitchers that I don't, let me put it this way, that I hope we are not going to see on the roster for a lot of the rest of this year. They won this game with Avila and Honeywell pitching most of 6 innings for this team. And that's okay, we don't want to rely on that. We're probably not going to build a playoff run on that. But to get 1 win out of that, I'm pretty psyched.
It's the flip side of the coin of us going well, it's going to come down to 1 game. There's 8 teams in the playoffs. To drop this one is a real kick in the middle. This one was not. This was a buoyancy in the heart, and something that they might be able to build off of if they can take this series home and go greet those blue bastards.
Yeah. And I'm not too hung up on them having to burn Josh Hader tonight. He didn't pitch yesterday, and they have an off day on Thursday. So, while it's unfortunate that Tim Hill, who looks increasingly washed as appearances go on, it couldn't get the job done. I don't think it necessarily spells trouble for tomorrow.
Looking back now, some more. Garrett Cooper coming to this team, I think, really helps what was about to become a pressure point. Because game after game, the Padres have been starting 2 catchers. And it's worked enough. It's worked enough for the Padres to get by. But ideally, you are not grinding your 2 catchers every single day for 60 straight days and trying to hope that they're going to be worth a damn at the end of that 2-month period. That's alleviated now with the acquisition of Garrett Cooper. Between Cooper and Choi, DH should be covered by one of those two guys 8 or 9 out of 10 games. There might be a rare circumstance where a position player needs a rest, or maybe you do get, maybe it's a straight lefty situation and you're overstocking and you're pulling Cronenworth and you've got Cooper at first and Campy and Sanchez. But that's the type of overload situation that's exciting to give the manager the option to have. The biggest thing is now there's a pressure valve. You don't have to start 2 catchers and I want to give him credit too. We talked about today's game. Jake Cronenworth got his 5th straight multi-hit game today. He went over the 220 mark. He is hitting well. So right now I would not suggest taking him out of the lineup. Like, he's doing what you want him to do. But it's nice to know that if Jake Cronenworth got into a 6 for 65, that we wouldn't have to see 35 of those 65 at bats because those could get absorbed by G-Man Choi and by Garrett Cooper. And now we have the depth to overcome the circumstance of one of our regulars struggling horribly at that position. I think that opportunity is potentially huge for the team over its last 55 games.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we got really lucky this week, guys. It almost feels like a distant memory, but there was a good chance Ha-Sung Kim was going to be out for a significant amount of time. And the idea that we can move Cronenworth back over to second base in a longer term if we need to, which also I think alleviates some of the offensive pressure he's under, which I think just subconsciously has affected the style of hitter he's tried to be and what we're slowly seeing him work out of trying to put the ball into the seats every time when really that short, compact swing that pretty much I think got him that extension in the first place with that hit against the Dodgers was ultimately what made Cronenworth so successful. So I think, again, this is just another part of this trade deadline day that gives us some optionality and allows many different configurations of the lineup to come.
There's only one thing the Padres don't have that I really wish they would have, which is one more power left-handed arm in the bullpen. They always wanted that to be Drew Pomerantz, and, they can keep hoping for
He's coming, Craig.
Yeah.
He just threw a horseshoe.
Right.
He threw a horseshoe in Peoria. It looked great. It came close.
Yeah, but then it hit Adrian Morejon in the knee on the way down. And as a result, Morejon had a setback. So we'll never see Adrian Morejon again. Just blew my mind. It was like, oh, Adrian Morejon twisted his ankle. The next report was like, well, we'll probably never see him again. Like, he's rehabbing, but nah, it's going to take way too long. So, like, having one more of those guys would be helpful. Tim Hill, again, today came into a 4-run situation and forced Josh Hader into a game because he just can't get anybody out. In a playoff bullpen, Rich Hill would go into the bullpen. I'm going to be super nervous when Rich Hill is staring down some monster on a playoff team in a dream scenario, and it's the bases loaded. And it's like, is it going to be that 88-mile-an-hour fastball or that big looping curve? Please, please, please guess wrong, batter. Like it's scary and not what I want. And it's far too Mark Langston. Mark Langston had a way better fastball than Rich Hill. I'm not even being nice, but it's that type of guy that gets you nervous. That's the one thing I really wish they have. But when we're talking about guys who they replace, Rafi, Barlow coming in replaces Luis Garcia having to do anything, and or it allows Brent Honeywell to be optioned. And then Garcia now gets the Honeywell, you're down 6. Who gives a shit?
No options.
No options for Honeywell.
Oh,
no
dear.
options. He would have to be DFA'd, which he might clear waivers. I don't know if other teams see a Brent Honeywell reclamation project, but he doesn't get options for other teams either. So other teams would be in the same situation as us if they were to pick him up. But his time on the Padres could be limited. I haven't really had a lot of time to talk about Luis Garcia on the show. But he's 36 years old. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that things have started to kind of slow down for him. I thought when he had those first couple bad games, there was a huge push immediately from the fan base back. DFA Luis Garcia, which I thought was kind of an overreaction. I think he's at that point, he was like a career sub 4 ERA pitcher. Now he's slightly over 4. I think he kind of earned that benefit of the doubt. But increasingly, he's just looking like he's not sliding down the aging curve. He's like on the double black diamond of the aging curve, and took a helicopter up to the top of the slopes and is going down. He's been a little unlucky. He's rocking a sub like 4, I think like a mid 4s FIP, but like a mid 5s ERA. But yeah, it's, again, it's just, this bullpen is not want for hard throwing righties. It's just the efficacy of them on any given day. And I would take Scott Barlow over Luis Garcia right now 10 times out of 10. So I'm really excited by that. And I'm also excited to potentially have the Brent Honeywell project be over, despite how much I was hoping for his success. I think tonight was just another example of the kind of performance we've seen from him, especially in a situation like pitching at Coors where his stuff is just not going to succeed.
All right. And to wrap up this segment, Chris, I want to give you a little hope because you wanted an outfielder. And I believe, and it's not happened yet, but I believe that today's transactions will net the Padres adding an outfielder to the team. Follow my reasoning, please.
I'm here.
By adding Choi and Cooper, as I mentioned before, one of the things that happens is it releases Bob Melvin from the must start 2 catchers every game circumstance. That forced the Padres to call Brett Sullivan back up for the just in case. I think it was even just today that Campy took one up, toward the hands. Like, you just didn't know, right? What if something happens? No, he took one off the forehead. Like, what if someone gets knocked out of the game? Then you lose your DH. So by making these moves, now you shouldn't have to start Sanchez except for when he catches. And you shouldn't have to start Campusano except for when he catches. They should move into a timeshare that makes them fresher. As a result, you should be able to bump Brett Sullivan back to AAA.
100%.
And the guy I want to see called up is Ben Gamel. I think Ben Gamel is just a perfect fit for this team's bench. He's got versatility. He's got the left-handed bat. He's got the opportunity to come in a platoon situation, come in a pinch hit situation, come in a defensive situation, offer a little bit of versatility to the Padres. He's not a great player, guys. You know what he is? He's a Major League Baseball replacement level average player. And it's the final piece to me of getting guys off the roster that are completely not Major League players and replacing them with average to, in some cases, I think here, slightly above average Major League players today. And then seeing if changing the 21 to 26 really does make a big difference for this team.
Well, Rafe talked about, Odor being a victim of not having the giant contract that you can hide behind and be like, well, we got Matt Carpenter here and he's making a lot of money, so we got to get rid of Rougned Odor. Regardless, Rougned Odor started a lot of games in right field for the Padres this year. It was a major sign of things not being kosher, not being great, not being, I don't want to say clean, but just unclean. It was not great. Ben Gamel sounds like a Major League outfielder. That's all I want is guys playing the positions that they've lived their whole lives playing, and giving them the best chance to succeed when their number gets called inevitably in the course of a Major League season, when there's only 26 guys on the team, and you're going to have huge spots that everyone is going to find themselves in. So I want them comfortable. I want them hungry. And, I know nothing about Ben Gamel. I'm not going to pretend that I do. So let's see it, Craig. I'll be rooting for him on your behalf and Padres fans everywhere.
I'm gonna be a little bit of a damper on this parade, just because Ben Gamel is putting he's putting up an impressive 137 WRC plus currently in El Paso. However, Alfonso Rivas put up a 154 WRC plus in El Paso, and all that earned him was being the also ran in the G-Man Choi and Dick Mountain trade. So Ben Gamel does have major league experience. However, he's pre-COVID removed from his last season in which he put up more than one win above replacement. So I'm not expecting anything from him other than being a replacement level outfielder. That being said, I think right now I'd probably prefer him to Taylor Coley, and then again, it's again like we've been saying ad nauseum on this podcast.
Saying.
The 21 through 26, 21 through 26 on the roster, getting a little bit better, and that's all we can hope for.
Literally all I'm saying. Ben Gamel is a better outfielder than Brandon Dixon or Rougned Odor will ever be. He's a bench option that at least has had 3 seasons of an OPS plus of 100 or better in Major League Baseball, which Taylor Colway is never going to have in his entire career. And it's replacing negative ones with 0.2 or 0.3 and hoping that adds up to something. And I think it does. And there's one last piece to this puzzle. It should be within a week or 2 weeks that Matt Batten's replaced by Eggy Rosario. And that's going to add some athleticism, some speed, a little bit of pop, maybe a little bit of upside to the Padres bench. And all of a sudden, you can look down your bench on a given day and have, instead of Carpenter and Batten and Brett Sullivan and Colway, right? It's just sick. It makes me sick to my stomach to say it. You can have Choi and Cooper and Gamble and Rosario and like a pretty decent bench and one of Sanchez or Camposano, one of those 2 guys. And those are the 5 guys that you've got to pick from on a given day. And that's just infinitely better than where the Padres have been. No, it's not. No, it's not. That was a deep exaggeration. It's finitely better than the Padres have been. That's all we need is some finite improvement. We don't need to go for the infinite.
Agreed. You're allowed to hyperbolize, Craig. It's okay. It's the trade deadline.
Just, nothing's infinitely better. Then we shouldn't even play.
He's infinitely better. I'm going home.
That's it. I was saying to my buddies, as we were talking on the golf course on Sunday about constant improvement, right? And the goal is just constant improvement. So you get to bogey golf, and then you get to maybe mixing some pars, and then eventually a 72, and then you want to continue to constantly improve. So you want to get to a 60, and then eventually a 30, and then an 18, and then you want to get to the point where you just mentally look at the ball and it just appears in the hole 500 yards away, and at that point stop playing. Like you have mastered the game. So
then you're done.
Yeah, you're done.
It's what those Scottish clansmen always intended.
That's infinitely better. It's just you just show up and the scoreboard's like, oh, today it is 25,000-0. Another perfect game for you. We don't even need to play. The game has been done by ChatGPT. All right. We're going to have a chat with David J from madfriars.com as we flip the coin. Padres, we've just decided, all of us here on the show, they've added major league players. They've improved their bench. This team is better than it was a day ago. But what did they give up? Is there a Jack Sawinski? Is there a River Ryan? Is there someone in the mix that we're going to be screaming their name up into the rafters for years to come? David J is going to help us out from madfriars.com. Our patrons hear this straight through. For everyone else, it comes to you after this. Couple of exciting pieces of news for those of you who are out there supporting us in the Padres hot tub universe. The first is that we have a new show. Are you a fan of the baseball game Immaculate Grid, which is now getting hundreds of thousands of plays per day? Well, we've got the show Immaculate Talk, your 20-minute companion podcast Monday through Friday to Immaculate Grid. I'm joined each one of those days by Joe Sheehan, a friend of mine for over 30 years and one of the most respected baseball writers out there. And we go square by square through the 3x3 grid. It's led to all sorts of fun stories. We're doing some themed grids and more. So check it out. It's available on every one of the podcast platforms that you can support us on Padres Hot Tub. You can find Immaculate Talk and check it out. Our second is that, hey, the Patreon community, now's the perfect time. We're embracing the long shot. We're embracing I Still Believe, the iconic anthem of the Lost Boys soundtrack, as the theme of our summer to drive forward to an improbable playoff burst. So why not become part of this community as we are joyous and in grievance and grieving sometimes together? You can find it all at patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub, as low as $5 a month, patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. But for the folks who come in at a higher tier, the chance to go to a Padres-Dodgers game with us, to go to some of these big pennant race games down the stretch, free of charge at Petco Park, just as part of your patronage. That's just one of several perks that you can take advantage of. Check it out. I don't need to tell you about it all. Find it more. Patreon.com/Padres Hot Tub. All right. We've talked about who the Padres got. We've talked about how those players are going to change the roster and push some of the chaff out, hopefully in place of some solid wheat. But have the Padres let out of the system in order to make this trade deadline happen? We are so excited to welcome for the first time to this version of Padres Hot Tub our friend David Jay from madfriars.com. David, it's been like a year or so, but nonetheless, it's great to talk to you, my friend.
Absolutely. Always good to talk.
All right. So as we talked about, we're going to be really focused now on the exit price. So let's start with the first trade of the day, because I think a lot of people were surprised to hear 3 names go out for 2 rentals, especially a couple of guys that people knew. Jackson Wolf, who came up for 1 start, Alfonso Rivas, who's been up for a couple of cups of coffees, Estuar Suero, who probably no one here except for you knows about. So, so what are your thoughts on these 3 guys living for Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's interesting. And, the Padres and Pirates have definitely hooked up on a fair number of deadline deals over time. And it sort of follows some of the moves that in terms of what the Pirates have looked for in the past. So, you've got Jackson Wolf, who is really a great success story for scouting and development, right? He was a 4th round pick as a senior sign. So he came in under slot in 2021. Right, they signed him for a couple $100,000 less than the slot available to him because they were interested in this big 6'7" lefty who they thought they might be able to coax a little bit more velocity out of. He has added some velocity since he came into the system, but he's still a guy who relies much more on movement than velocity. We were all had him pretty clearly in the middle of our top 30s coming into this season. He's had good results in San Antonio, but is, I think, a little bit of a tweener as he goes forward. What you saw in that emergency start last week is sort of what you get, right? He's not a guy who's going to get a lot of swing and miss, even though he's had good strikeout rates in AA. He's probably not. He's a guy who's going to have to rely on the deception, the funky look that he gives you. And that's sort of a difficult skill set to use in a relief role. So, he's may not have enough to start. He may not have the right repertoire to be in relief, but he's got a lot of interesting pieces to him. Obviously, by bringing him up, they've now got him on the 40-man roster and started his big league service time. Pittsburgh is definitely a place that's going to give him more opportunity to start than he probably would have gotten if he'd stayed in the organization here. Really good guy. We've been a fan of his since he came into the system, and definitely I'm excited for him. He grew up in Eastern Ohio and has a lot stronger roots in that area. So I think that'll be a nice landing spot for him. Rivas is a guy who, aside from his stellar academic credentials that include La Jolla Country Day locally and the University of Arizona, which I always like to point out to Conniff and on our team here. He signed as a minor league free agent. He's been an up and down guy. Already had lost his prospect status when he signed, but wouldn't have really landed in the top 30. And, when you look at the fact that when everything was said and done, the 2 guys they designated for assignment were Preston Tucker and Brandon Dixon, he's kind of in that same bucket, and I think with those two first base DH guys coming in, it's tough to see him having a pathway to stay with the organization. Like you said, the sort of interesting guy here for me is Estuar Suero, who we saw in extended, and then when I was out in the desert for the start of the Arizona Complex League last month. Young, he's at 17, despite the fact that he's a couple months older than a certain catcher up in Lake Elsinore. He's also one of the youngest guys in the Complex League this year. 6'5", 6'6", adding a frame that you can see adding a ton of muscle as time goes on. He's a switch hitter, can really move when he's underway, and he's also really, really raw. And he's a guy who, Kyle Glazer tweeted something out last night that 1 in 5 prospects traded at the deadline ever go on to a meaningful big league career, right? And he's definitely an interesting prospect. He certainly would have been for me probably in the 20 to 25 range in the organization going into the off season, but he's also probably not going to start next year in full season ball, and is quite a ways off. And so I think the Padres obviously just drafted both Dylan Head in the first round and Homer Bush Jr. in the fourth, who are very athletic center field types that sort of that same profile as Estuar. So, I think if you're going to go the route that the Padres did at the deadline, he's exactly the kind of prospect depth that you trade from to make a marginal improvement at the big league level. And, I suspect that he ultimately will land in sort of the group of guys like Victor Acosta and Jason Rosario and Jordy Barley over time that are really interesting, talented, athletic prospects who their path to the big leagues is going to be a long one.
Real quick on a follow-up, but Rafi and Chris, I wanted to get you guys involved in this because when I saw this trade come down, two things tumbled into place in my head like Tetris blocks floating into the exact right configuration. The first was the interview Bob Melvin had the day before Jackson Wolf started when he was added to the roster and everyone was asking about him. And he was like, he had this, I heard it twice. It was weird. I heard it on 97.3 and I heard it the next day. And he was as non-committal as you could be. He was like, well, the organization thinks that this might be the guy to pitch today. So this is the guy that's going to pitch today. And maybe kind of feel like he's not that interested in Jackson Wolf being here. Then that day, Jackson Wolf starts and 4 batters into his outing, rain pours down, stops the game for over 90 minutes for well beyond the established routine window of when you bring a pitcher back from a rain delay. And they came out of that rain delay and Jackson Wolf was back out there. And I was like, what the hell are the Padres doing? What's going on? The answer to me is obvious, guys. This was an organizational move. Jackson Wolf was gonna be showcased in the big leagues. Come hell or high water, they were gonna get him 5 innings, and that led to an even unique circumstance. Because they were gonna do it once, because they wanted to trade his ass. So it wasn't like, oh, that's okay, Jackson. You only got 4 outs this time. You'll be back in another turn. No, you're going to be on Pittsburgh in another turn, dude. So, we're going to get you back out there 5 hours after the game has been delayed by rain. I just, that was such an organizational move. And the tic-tac-toe of it is pretty apparent now in hindsight.
For sure, dude. That was, I had the same thought. And, oh gosh, sorry guys. Go ahead, Rafi.
We can point to the potentially growing and increasingly public rift between Bob Melvin and AJ Preller. Bob Melvin maybe taking on the Rocky IV Dolph Lundgren role, just being like, listen, if he dies, he dies. We're going to leave him out there, rain delay or not. But yeah, again, my feeling on this trade is Fangraphs put out a really interesting article several years ago about how they value their top 100 prospects. And one of the cool things that they did was that they included the bust rate, the percentage at which these prospects who are given these ratings put up less than one WAR over the course of their careers. And the lowest ranking that they went down to for this article was a 50 grade. So Estuar Suero is a 40 plus, so well below a 50 grade position player. And 50 grade position players at the time of this article in 2018 were busting at a rate of 51.5%. So, it's a coin flip, for a 50 grade prospect of whether or not they're going to come and produce at the major league level. And, Estuar Suero is well below that. So, again, this guy certainly has the upside that he could come and be an all-star. But that's a very long time and a very long way and a lot of, fortunate circumstances for Suero and now the Pittsburgh Pirates from happening. And until that happens, this is a kind of a whatever, player to throw into the trade,
Sorry about that, guys. It's been a long day of being awake. What I want to point out, Craig, is it feels a lot like Esteury Ruiz last year. He's a guy that the team didn't seem to have a roster spot for because Jose Azocar was filling in, on the reg and kind of had the profile of a speedy contact guy who can play decent defense. And then Esteury was up for a minute, and then he was just gone. You're like, okay, well, it was nice. He was kind of exciting. We'll see where that goes. Well, that went to Oakland eventually, and Josh Hader came here, and we'll take it every time.
Yeah, and that's the Wolf comp. That's the Wolf comp exactly. As a guy who just shows up for a flash, and now he'll be on another team. Now, David, moving from the Pittsburgh exit price to Florida, I think this Florida trade wound up being one that really intrigued all of us because obviously Ryan Weathers is out. We've all got pretty firm and formed opinions on Ryan Weathers. If you'd like to interject one that isn't replacement at best player in baseball, feel free.
But so I'll just note, the number of big league left-handed starters who can sit 97 for multiple innings is a remarkably short list, even in this day of velocity. And, it doesn't have enough of a VAR on it and it can really flatten out. But, what we've seen when he's gone back down is that when he uses his changeup more than his sweeper, he's more effective. But for whatever reason, he seems really in love with the sweeper. It would not surprise me to see him come through and be a guy who works, who throws 30 games for a team a couple of years. I think it's going to be mix and match with some pretty ugly stretches along the way, but. Again, there just aren't that many guys that can throw 97 from the left-hand side as starters, and he's got that in there. So, but I do think I'm guessing that was not the hardest decision the organization's made.
Can I just say something really quickly on what Ryan Weathers and him leaving? Because I agree that like his time here was limited. Like, it just seemed like there was tension. The family tweets were an example of just like, certainly Ryan and the organization maybe not being on the same plane, same position. But him leaving in the way that he did, a first round pick leaving for a rental and a 40 value prospect, it from an organizational standpoint, it's a failing, and he's still 23 years old. He's made some mechanics changes, and I am of the opinion that Ryan Weathers in San Diego was not necessarily going to work out. I was not bullish on him, panning out as a prospect for the team. So if you want to look at it from that sense, then getting rid of him and getting some value for him is good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't going to produce here, so therefore anything we get is upside. It's still an organizational failure of a first round pick leaving for basically nothing in the long run of things. So I don't want that to be lost in the Ryan Weathers discussion.
Yeah, I'll quibble a little bit just because, again, he's going to wind up with a career WAR, probably somewhere between 5 and 10 total WAR over the course of his lifetime. That's that's a success as far as a number 7 overall pick in baseball goes, right? Like, I mean, you're looking at who are the guys ahead of him in that class. You got Joey Bart, you've got Nick Madrigal, you've got Jared Kelenic, who, if the Mariners fans had their way, would have been shipped to the moon somewhere in February of this year.
Mm-hmm.
You've got guys like Travis Swaggerty and Jordan Groshans right behind him, both of whom have already been moved on from their original organizations. It is really hard to get very talented players to the big leagues and have them be long-term contributors. That, in any given draft class, there are on the order of 5 future long-term all-star players at most. And there are years like the 2011 class that they aren't there, right? So, at the time of the draft, who did it really come down to? It was him or Cole Winn or Matthew Liberator. And now, 5+ years later, all 3 of those guys are in the exact same boat of they might be able to put together more than that 5 to 10 WAR I was talking about, but I wouldn't really bet on it for any of the 3 of them.
Certainly.
It's a really good, I think a really good analysis. And it's so, I appreciate it because it's so easy for us to just pile dirt because Ryan Weathers hasn't been good in the big leagues and just say, peace out, sayonara. But you make 2 great points, both of the still untapped potential and also just what it means for a big leaguer, a first round pick to actually make it to the big league. So there's the Florida trade. Let's talk about the last trade, the Kansas City trade. Henry Williams. This is a more recent draft pick, as I remember, and one of those Tommy John reclamation projects, right, David?
Yeah, exactly. So he was their 3rd round pick last year. He's a really good example of why it's important to be able to maximize value in the draft, right? So as a 3rd round pick, he got an overslot bonus. The Padres saved a fair amount of money in signing Robbie Snelling, which, for the record, is looking like a brilliant draft move in the compensation round last year, competitive balance round last year. But so they overpaid a little bit for Williams against his slot value. And, this is one of those places where I think it's a really great illustration of what scouts and scouting organizations value and how that can play out. So, Williams is a kid who, as a sophomore at Duke, had decent results. They weren't exceptional, but you looked at him and he's this big righty and he's going to be a guy who you can add 30 pounds of muscle. He's going to get a little bit more of a feel for what he's doing. You're going to see that fastball have more ride on it. He's a guy who midway through his sophomore year, you look at him and say, if he takes these steps ahead, he could be a 1st round pick by the end of his junior season. And then he had Tommy John surgery between his sophomore and junior year. And if you go back and read all of the reports at the time of the draft, right, what everybody says is he was a guy who'd been getting some 1st round buzz, right? Which is true, but incomplete. He's a guy who was on a list of players who, if you saw the development you'd want, you think, hey, he could be a 1st round pick. At the point they got to the 3rd round last year and he was there and willing to sign at a number that worked for them, that's a great gamble to take, right? And then you get him into the system, you get him fully healthy, you work with him through his rehab, and you see what you get from him. And so they did that, and he, continued his rehab all last summer and through the fall and started, a real progression here in the spring. And what they saw is a guy whose fastball isn't progressed from where it was as a sophomore at Duke. He's done a lot of work in the gym, and he still doesn't have that bigger, more dominant physique that you would want to see from a guy who you're going to develop as a starter. And he quickly fell behind a lot of other arms from last year's draft class, right? I mean, clearly he's behind Snelling and Lesko. That's hardly a knock on a guy, but he's also behind guys like but like Austin Krob, he's certainly behind Mazer, who got a smaller signing bonus than him. And quite frankly, he's behind some other guys who've been pitching at Elsinore this year. A guy like Henry Baez, who I think is kind of just woefully undervalued by some of the national prospect writers, who has a chance to take a giant step forward next year. And so, again, if you're looking at it from the Padres have decided they're going to double down on this roster and they're going to make a run at it despite what all the odds say, well, if you can get a guy who's an established big league closer for Henry Williams, who may indeed, next year, another year off the surgery, where, he'll come to camp next year. What'll that be? 30 months after a surgery, 28 months after a surgery. Maybe there will be another mile or two in there, and then all of a sudden he's a different profile. But again, you're talking about the fifth most interesting guy who's started for your low A roster this year. That's you don't have to do too much advanced calculus to say, yeah, we'll take the chance on
that. And then Jesus Rios.
Yeah, Rios just sort of the fact that he was scouted and acquired in a trade is really kind of remarkable to me. I feel fairly confident in saying that outside of the organization, I probably pay more attention to like obscure names in the system than just about anybody. And he was one I had to go back and do a double check on. And it was like, especially after Suaro's name was butchered in the initial reports, I was like, are they thinking of somebody else? And it's a 21-year-old. He's out of Mazatlan. He signed his first professional contract in January. He's pitching in the DSL, where there you go. He's working in middle relief with mediocre results in the DSL. If somebody in the Royal system knows something, I guess, but I don't suspect that's going to be the one out of this trade deadline that you go, oh wow, I can't believe we gave up on him.
Chris, you're muted.
You're muted.
I didn't say any bad words there, guys. David, I do find it interesting that the platitudes you told that the club could tell itself about Henry Williams, that he could put on 30 pounds more of added muscle and he could figure things out, are the same things I tell myself every morning. Am I being traded to the Royals?
There are worse gigs.
It's true. Get to hang out with the Pasquatch.
Yeah.
Well, last thing, David, is to talk about what this means going forward, because one thing we haven't discussed on the podcast yet, so let's talk about it right now. It should be obvious, but sometimes you get money in these trades. There's been no report of money coming to the Padres in any of these trades. Padres picked up major league salaries for Ji-Man Choi and Rich Hill and Garrett Cooper and Scott Barlow, adding to a team that was already threatening to be over. And now it's for sure they're going to be over that second luxury tax threshold. So remind everybody, and I've forgotten, what does it mean for the Padres in terms of what they lose for bonus pool, what they lose for compensation, et cetera, next year?
Yeah. So, and I'm just going off of the numbers that are out in public, but my takeaway is the same, that this will definitely lock them in as being over that second tax threshold level. And that means it slides their first pick back 10 spots in next year's draft. They are certainly hoping that that's a slide from somewhere in the 20s to somewhere in the 30s. One of those things where if this doesn't work and they don't make the playoffs, and then all of a sudden you're costing yourself from, in the mid-teens down to the mid-20s, that obviously just piles on the salt in the wound. So you've got the slide back 10 spots. The other thing, assuming that both Snell and Hader leave after QOs, and certainly, from where I sit, it's hard to imagine getting to a point where they've got 8 guys under contract for the next 478 years at a total of, an average of $25 million apiece. I would expect that both of those are guys who are going to leave. Instead of getting picks after the second round as compensation, by virtue of being over that second threshold, it slides them back to between the 4th and 5th rounds. The other thing that does is takes on the order of $1 million out of the total signing pool. And then when you factor in the slide back another 10 picks, you're talking about $1.4 or so million that they would otherwise have to spend on the draft next year that they won't. And again, for context, what that means is what they went over to get James Wood 3 years ago. 2 years ago. Good Lord, time is a construct.
It's an illusion.
Yeah. So that has a real impact. The other piece that it potentially means is to sign a free agent from another team that received a qualifying offer. They would take a $1 million hit on their international pool money. And the piece that becomes interesting in that is, it's widely reported that they have an agreement in place with Leo DeVries, who's a shortstop, who's considered one of the top players in that international free agent class. And it seems likely they're going to do something like what they did with Salas this year and give him, 98% of the total pool. I don't know that is doable if you take $1 million hit on the international pool. Especially because they're already going to be down this year without being in the revenue sharing group. So those are some of the pieces that could have a trickle down on how they bring amateur talent into the organization over the next year. The organization has demonstrated an ability to find interesting talent. On day 2 and day 3 of the draft to find they signed for a mid 6-figure total, but he wasn't one of the headliners of last year's international class. So, it's not debilitating, but it does become limiting pretty quickly.
David, I had a quick question just for folks who may not be familiar with the draft. Can you give a sense to our listeners of what the difference in quality is from the qualifying offer comp picks that come after the first round versus the ones that could come between the 4th and the 5th, which is what we'd be set back to? What's the difference in these types of players that we're talking?
Yeah, just sort of numbers wise, right? If you're talking about a player, the picks right after the second round, you're talking about somebody in the 70-ish range amongst all eligible players, and if you slide that back another 60 picks, that's somebody who's in the top 130, 140. And, there are always players to be found at all levels of the draft, right? And you look at history, and what it tells you is that players in the first round are nearly 3 times as likely to make the big leagues as players in the second round. And some of that is, some of that really is just a self-fulfilling thing, right? If I'm the GM and I've paid a first round talent and, he comes out and looks really crappy in his second year out at an affiliate, I'm not wondering whether I'm going to cut him loose or I'm going to reduce his playing time, right? So he's going to get that shot that a guy in the 5th, the 7th, the 10th round might not get. Historically, it's pretty clear, guys. The bulk of big league successful players are at the top of their draft class from the guys who are domestic products.
I just want to underline the last thing you said. I just want to make sure I heard it right. So in the world that some small percentage of Padres fandom still clings to, and I know I did at some point in my life, where the Padres go and try and sign Shohei Ohtani this offseason, he would obviously receive the qualifying offer from the Angels. And one potential downside risk of signing a Shohei Ohtani or anyone of that class, but a Shohei Ohtani, is that it could literally cost you DeVries someone that you've had kind of on lock for a year.
Yeah. And, I mean, if the question is all things equal, if your choice is you've got, you've got the unicorn best player in the history of the sport or a really talented 16-year-old shortstop, all things equal, that's not a tough trade-off. And I think that there are probably some bigger issues for the Padres trying to sign a guy who probably is going to come closer to $600 million than $500 million when all's said and done on this next deal.
Right. But I mean, it would apply to
Yeah.
Lucas Giolito.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly. Any of those sort of top tier free agents, you'd take that hit. Absolutely.
Great to know, and something I don't think anyone else is going to discuss. So, David, truly, like really good stuff. Let everybody know, please, how they can continue to support Madfriars.
Yeah, absolutely. So, our Madfriars coverage every day. We've got a report about what's going on across the system. We're just at madfriars.com. We're fairly active on Twitter. The smart stuff's me. The rest of it's John. Pretty clearly. So we've got that daily coverage that's free and out there. And then for our subscribers, we've got interviews with players, with player development and scouting staff, sort of across the organization on a regular basis. And so, that's for folks who are following us now. I think what they're going to start to see is that, now all of a sudden that there are some more big league relief options and contributors. Probably going to see guys like Adam Mazur and Jairo Iriarte, who've moved into relief roles in San Antonio. Wouldn't be surprised if you see them shift back into starting, because certainly Mazur's going to develop there best. So we'll be having coverage like that. Jay Groom, for folks who've been following us, know that the last couple of outings have been a lot stronger for him after just a meltdown through the first half. At this point, having traded the two sort of up and down lefties on the 40-man roster, Groom's the other guy left, right? So, certainly I think, the point of bringing Hill in is not to need another guy like that. But at this point, right, at this point, the big league depth options in the minors, if you need a starter, assuming that the Cole Hamels experiment never quite happens, which I get the sense is where things are, you're talking about Jay Groom and Pedro Avila, who we saw tonight. So all that coverage is on the site on a regular basis. We appreciate the subscribers who afford us the chance to get out to the affiliates and keep the website alive. And, that's what makes all this possible for us. So we always appreciate it, and, love the chance to talk with you guys and others who are really thoughtful about what's going on across the organization. So really, really appreciate it, guys.
You guys have a tremendous team. John's obviously the old hand who's been at the till for the longest time. David, as a member of our Patreon community, is a guy we lean on. Ben Davey, incredible yourself. Great stuff. Kevin Charity, you guys have really put it all together. So thank you so much. You've been generous with your time here with us tonight.
Pleasure.
And thanks for giving us a great perspective on everyone who has left the Padres organization.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
All right, let's wrap things up. We have taken, I think, a very comprehensive look at what the Padres have brought in, how it'll change their roster, and what they've let go. But that is only looking at one tree in the forest. So let's quickly look, because the Padres are not poking up out of the forest canopy.
They are not the lone pine.
They are not. They are not the General Sherman tree, towering above all. So let's look at what our competition did to grow today as well. I want to start at the top, and I had it on in the background here. The Dodgers beat the A's, which, okay, whatever, today. But the Dodgers didn't have a great deadline, guys. They got the requisite ripping in the LA Times by Bill Plaschke today, which is just fun.
As is tradition.
It is truly tradition. But, a couple days ago, they got Kike Hernandez back. That's fine. He fits into the locker room. They traded on Sunday for Lance Lynn, who has been, I believe, statistically the worst starter in the American League this year. But of course, it's the Dodgers, so they might, sprinkle their dust on him, and he pitches to a 2 ERA. And then today, they traded for Detroit's Eduardo Rodriguez. And then Eduardo Rodriguez said, no, I specifically don't want to be an LA Dodger, and invoked a 10-team no-trade clause to tell the Dodgers to F off. And Friedman had to pivot. And in a trade that came out, I think, like a couple minutes before the Padres' last two trades, they acquired Ryan Yarbrough from the Kansas City Royals, a pitcher that I know a couple of members of our Discord had been salivating over for like weeks.
Just tears in the Discord.
To get Ryan Yarbrough. I mean, I actually had Ryan Yarbrough on my fantasy team the last couple of years because he was in Tampa getting that bulk pitching spot where you could like go 3 semi-effective innings and get a win because you came in after a guy who went like 1 2/3 perfect innings. And so I thought he was a fantasy hack of sorts, but he's also kind of a baseball hack in terms of he's not very great. Like he's not an incredible pitcher. I know the Dodgers improve seemingly every player that they get, but I don't feel like the Dodgers did anything at the trade deadline that makes you feel like they're just a so much better team than they were before.
Not going to counter that point, though. You did miss the Ahmed Rosario move from Cleveland.
That's true. And I mean, that's better than Miggy Rojas, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
They were playing Mookie Betts at shortstop, and that's the situation that things were at in LA. So
he is also statistically the worst defending shortstop in the American League.
Ahmed Rosario.
Yeah.
So some moves. The Dodgers were already a good team. Like today, Kike Hernandez cleared the bases with a double. Good for him. The Dodgers always seem to have good karma on their stuff. But they didn't Max Scherzer and Trey Turner their way into a dominant deadline that makes you feel like they're now the team to beat. Right. Yeah, they were rumored for Arenado. They were rumored for Cease. They were rumored for Erod. And they don't get any of those guys. They get depth pieces just like the Padres got. So is that going to be a difference? It could be. It's a long race to get to the LA Dodgers, but I don't think they got a ton better today. Rafi, the Giants got AJ Pollock and another dude. They, I saw Farhan Zaidi's press conference today. He, basically did the like, well, yeah, we could have traded half our farm system for a fifth starter, but we're not stupid. We're smart. So we only did this. I don't think the Giants are any better than they were before.
Well, I can't emphasize how bad AJ Pollock's been this season. He's put up a 51 WRC plus this year. He's worth negative 0.5 F4. This is about the biggest buy low that you could ever have for the Giants. And, they're one of those teams like the Dodgers that, it doesn't surprise me with how well they're coached and the staff that they have that AJ Pollock could come in and, make some mechanical adjustments and turn things around. And certainly with AJ Pollock, there's a good player that's in there. This is a guy who's put up over 20 career wins above replacement, in a very decent and long big league career. So it doesn't surprise me that if he comes in and starts producing a little bit better. That being said, it's been a couple years since he's really produced. So this is not something that is setting off my alarm bells at this point.
Dan Samorsky of the projection system Zips had a great tweet about this, which was the Giants are acquiring AJ Pollock, and there's no word yet on what the White Sox have sent them in order to do so.
Yeah, exactly. So Dodgers, very marginal improvement. Giants, no improvement unless Pollock hits the fountain of youth. AJ Pollock formerly played for the Dodgers, Giants, now Giants, and Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks made 2 moves, and one of them is obviously important. They got Paul Sewald from the Seattle Mariners. Paul Sewald is not the most dominant closer in baseball. He's not even as dominant as Andres Munoz. That's why I think from a Mariners standpoint, this is going to be a trade that they enjoy. They got Josh Rojas, who had not found himself in a spot. Perdomo had beaten him out. For the Diamondbacks, they got another fringe guy. But Sewald into the Diamondbacks bullpen means instant closer situation. And the Diamondbacks got Tommy Pham from the Mets for an infielder, Jeremy Rodriguez. They also traded Andrew Chafin, who had been one of their part-time closers, to the Brewers for a AAA reliever, Peter Strzelski. So I don't know why they decided they wanted to do that, but I would say they're a little better. The Diamond, I mean, Arizona was in a free fall that made me think that we'd pass them by the end of those 7 games. I'm not sure that I don't still believe that. Those 7 games are going to go a long way toward deciding this season over the course of the next 3 weeks. But I'm not scared of Tommy Pham or Paul Sewald for that matter.
Tommy Pham will beat you up.
Yeah, but maybe he'll beat up the Diamondbacks players too.
Oh, he'll beat up anybody you want him to. I mean, just point it, just put a blindfold on him, spin him around 3 times, and whoever you take off the blindfold, who he's looking at, he's in a fight.
And look, that's not filtered to like, oh, you say that about Tommy. Tommy Pham slapped Jock Peterson over a fantasy football result.
He wanted to fight Luke Voigt in a gym in San Diego just for being cute.
So Tommy Pham was a big part of the 2021 collapse of the San Diego Padres. He was a big part of that team's collapse. If the Padres had traded for Tommy Pham, I am telling you, I would have come onto this podcast scared shitless. Not like, oh, I'm scared of Tommy Pham. I'm scared of the impact this guy, this kind of recalcitrant dude, is going to have on my clubhouse. It's a wild card. You just don't know what card is going to get pulled, Rafe. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the Diamondbacks substantively improved their opportunity to stay ahead of San Diego?
Listen, first of all, I do want to give some respect to Paul Sewald. I don't know what. Sewald. Okay. But he has a sub-3 ERA this season in 43 innings. He's has a sub-3 FIP, 1 WAR. He is a very, very good relief pitcher for them, and it also allowed them to make the kind of pivot buy and sell move of selling Andrew Chafin to the Brewers. Chafin, who started out really well for the Diamondbacks, but has kind of had some consecutive collapse. As a Andrew Chafin fantasy owner, I know this kind of well. He has not been good as of late. And so, if you want to say not only is it an addition of Sewald, but also subtraction of Chafin, that they're getting a little bit better. But listen, I still think it's a team that hit their window a year too early, whatever you want to say. But that their rotation, I think, is just doesn't have the length that's going to carry them through a run. So I'm not, again, this doesn't really move the air bars for me.
It makes me really excited to see the Diamondbacks operating as Diamondback and not going out and doing the big crazy thing, the E-Rod or the Verlander or the big push.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a little bit better about where they think they are.
I agree. And those are the 3 teams in the division that the Padres would love to catch or pass. Looking at the wild card, the Cubs are the team other than the Padres who changed their fortune over the last 2 weeks the most. They had that 8-game winning streak. It took the big boy Bellinger off of the market. Yeah, they won 8 in a row.
I didn't know teams were allowed to win more than
no. After 3, you're supposed to stop. But some teams are naughty. See, Rafi, we're rule followers here in San Diego. We win 3 and then we stop and we let the other team win. But these naughty teams, they just keep winning. They're greedy. Not like us. We're the good guys.
Yeah.
So the Cubs got Jeimer Candelario, who is one of the most coveted available hitters on the market. He played third base for Washington. I believe he played first base for the Cubs today. I believe he's going to play first base for the Cubs for the most part. So, that whole Hosmer thing just didn't work out in the end. But Candelario...
They also...
Go ahead.
They also DFA'd Nick Mancini today.
They did. Or Trey Mancini, yeah.
Oh yeah, who's Nick Mancini? Who's that?
I don't know. Did he compose some clever movie scores? I think that was Peter Mancini. Yeah, Candelario helps the Cubs, who are, a 500 team, but another team that the Padres have to pass. I just don't think, I don't know. Do they have the pitching? Marcus Stroman has fallen off. I don't think the Cubs have the pitching. I think the Cubs just did their burst, and I think they bought at a moment to keep their fans in line. I'm not concerned about the Cubs. Is anyone concerned about the Cubs?
No. Next question.
The Marlins are next up. The Marlins added to their offense. Maybe they got Josh Bell, and we know how well that works out at the trade deadline. And they added Jake Berger, who has hit 25 homers for the White Sox this year with a Dave Kingman-esque 210 average. And so the Marlins have added some more 3 true outcome opportunity to their team. They already had Soler. Now they got Berger, another guy that'll randomly blast into a home run. Okay. They had previously added David Robertson from the Mets to solve their closing situation because AJ Puck had turned it into a hockey puck, basically. He was cooked. So what do you think about the Marlins trying to hold off the dead hand of inevitability?
It's a dead hand. They're a 51 and 56 Pythagorean win-loss percentage, which, obviously we've spoken at length about on this team, but they have been regressing hard over the last few weeks. They're 7 and 13 in their last 20. It doesn't get that much better as you expand out, 14 and 16 in their last 30. So there's someone who I think they're kind of patching, whatever that meme is of the duct tape or the magic seal where there's a leak sprung and you slap it on. And it's just, I think that's what they're doing is they're finding these little leaks and they're trying to, slap it on. But ultimately this ship is on its way to sinking.
You know what I hate about this move, Craig? Is that when I traded you Manny Machado in fantasy football, I replaced him with a young man named Jake Berger, who has been absolutely raking with the Chicago White Sox. Now he's going to go to Florida, where he's not going to hit because nobody in Florida hits, and I'm heading right back towards the basement.
Well, thank God, because you pissed me off last week. Phillies added Michael Lorenzen, who's a good starter that used to, in a world where pitchers hit, was a great hitting pitcher, but pitchers don't hit anymore. Michael Lorenzen is a back end starter for Philadelphia. He's a Rich Hill. He's better than Rich Hill,
Much better than Rich Hill.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not a playoff starter for the Philadelphia Phillies.
No, but he can give them the depth they kind of need to win games on the way there. This is actually the move I like best. They gave up like their number 5 prospect for the guy. Somebody slated not to be. It was Jun Lee or something like that, but like nothing too big. Phillies don't have a great system. The Padres is probably a little deeper. So, like, I'm really glad that it's not the Dodgers making this move. But of all the ones, like, I think that's the one that we might look back on and be like, man, Lorenzen to the Phillies kind of helped them in a way.
Yeah, I think, we've been kind of poo-pooing all of our other wild card opponents so far that you've listed. The Phillies scare me. The Phillies, and for a couple of reasons. One, they've got a nice head start on us. They're currently 57 and 49, not counting tonight's result. And the second is they're kind of constructed in a similar top-heavy fashion to the Padres. So if you're going to say that the Padres are going to turn it around because they have this foundation or whatever, you kind of philosophically have to think the same thing about the Phillies and say, hey, they're going to stick around and they're going to do well and blah, 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 blah. I don't think that Trey Turner is the man that we've seen so far this year. I don't think he's all of a sudden turned into a pumpkin after signing a $300+ million deal. So, I think that they do have room to improve, and I think just I'm in alignment with Chris on this one. It really extends them in a way that we kind of extended ourselves at this deadline.
Lastly, looking to the Central, there's the Brewers and the Reds. The Reds did literally nothing. I don't think that augurs well for them at all, to be honest. I think they're set for a late summer freefall, which probably puts the Reds in our purview more than the Brewers. The Brewers worked to add. They added a DH platoon of their own in Carlos Santana and Mark Canha. Obviously, Canha could play some outfield. Santana could play some first base, so it's not rigid. But a team that's very offensively challenged, added a couple of middling, C grade pieces. And also, as we talked about, Andrew Chafin, that left the Diamondbacks. He went to Milwaukee. You never know with a left-handed reliever. Maybe he goes there and he refines whatever touch that he didn't have in Arizona. So the Brewers did add, again, on the margins. The teams that made the big moves were in the American League West. It was Houston and Texas picking up the aces. It was the Angels picking up everybody from everywhere. And
they had a very AJ Preller feel to them this trade deadline.
Yeah, they had a very Artie Moreno feel to them of like, let's do some weird shit to maybe make one guy or maybe two guys happy. Nonetheless, I think that's great for the Padres. No major National League improvement. Atlanta got Brad Hand. I mean, Atlanta is the dominant team in the National League. And the great news is that if you're going to beat them, it's going to try to be in a 5-game series in the second round of the playoffs, just like the Dodgers last year. But that's not the path to the playoffs for the Padres. They don't have to worry about Atlanta. They have to worry about those 7 teams, 8 if you count Cincinnati, that we just talked about. And honestly, I think, okay, you guys want to put Philly at the top of that list for improvement? I mean, not the Dodgers.
It's not huge,
Diamondbacks?
but I think it's like the key piece. I think it's like what they needed. As if they're the same way. If their bats get going, if Turner is feeding that lineup, and they got Castellanos, Rio Muto, Harper. It's just a little sick, man. And if they're they're worried about their rotation, they got Walker pitching decent and Ranger Suarez, and like they traded Bailey Ober today, of course. But yeah, dude, they're at the list. They're number 1.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the Dodgers. The Dodgers had the second worst ERA from their starters in all of Major League Baseball in the month of July. I think they had, if not over a 5, they might have even been over a 6 ERA from their starters. And in their last 30 games, they're still 18-12. So, it gives you a sense of like just how good their offense is and just how productive they have been. And so even if they have Lance Lynn and Ryan Yarborough and, these kind of whatever guys coming in, really anything is better than what they've been getting in their last like little bit of performance. So, you can, I don't necessarily know so much that they're most improved as they are just like regressing back to their positive mean. I'm more focused on kind of the wild card teams, and I think Philly of those is the one that's in the best position. Yeah,
Rafi, we didn't talk about Joe Kelly going back to the Dodgers either.
Yeah, the vibes are the shitty graffiti artists in LA are losing their minds at this one. The amount of Joe Kelly murals I saw in this town after he did the little lip pouty thing was way fucking over-indexed. Okay, inflation hit, and it was the Joe Kelly graffiti mural game. Okay,
I remember that.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this has been a mega podcast. It ends on a mega note. How much better are we? Is it going to be enough? The Padres are 5 back, but they have a bunch of teams to pass. We just talked about 7 teams that all tried some way or another to get better today, including the Padres. Is this going to be enough? What do you think?
Chris, you should go first, please.
No, I don't think it's enough, Craig. I think they've kind of dug the hole a little too deep. But that's not to say I think they did the wrong thing today. We've talked about this. I think they absolutely did the right thing, and they did it extremely well. They got guys that are going to help. They're going to upgrade the bottom of that lineup. I just haven't seen this group go on the run that we need to see. They have a lot of ground to cover. They need an 8-game winning streak, just like the Cubs had. They need a run like the Diamondbacks had this year. They need a run like the Rays had. And that's all. Baseball's chaos. The variables are extreme. It's so friggin' hard to go on a run like that. So, in terms of did they get better? Yeah, they got better. Do I think it's enough right now? I still believe, Craig, to an extent, that runs in them. I still believe they're the talented roster that is required to be in a fantastic playoff team. But no, I think the hole's a little too deep, and I'm not sure this is going to get them out of it.
We never had the discussion at all over this course of this episode of like, was this the smart thing to buy or sell?
That's true.
Was this? You asked like if we're better, and I think that's actually like a philosophical question. I think like if you want to say in 2023, did we improve our chances to make the playoffs? Sure. I think we marginally improved our chances to make the playoffs. I think we certainly made the team more solid. And I think of the strategy that was being taken of like, hey, we're buyers now, but we don't want to go and abandon our top prospects and we want to improve around the edges. I think they did a pretty good job. Like, I think that like they got the guys they needed to get. They didn't give away too much. We'll see in 2037 about if we're going to regret the Estuar Suero trade. But until then, like, we're okay. But did we put ourselves as an organization in a better position with these moves? I don't think so. And I still think that there was a really large argument for selling, especially given the fact that like a lot of the big guys didn't move. And I know that, for instance, there were reports that were coming out that there were very high prices on selling Snell and Hader, and those prices were quote unquote not met. I don't know how serious any of those were actually. You know what I mean? I think they probably set really high prices. All the GMs said "fuck you" and hung up the phone because they're like, "That's ridiculous." And then AJ could go, "Oh, look, we listened to the offers about selling, but we never got anything good enough." And so in the long run for this organization, losing that extra little layer of depth from a farm system, was it really worth the extra 2 percentage points or whatever it is that we got? Actually losing the game last night was more detrimental to the team in terms of difference in playoff odds than any additions that we made today. Yeah. So like, again, the objective is not different. They still got to fucking win games, So like, did the team get better marginally? Was this the right move as an organization? Probably not. Was this good for what it was supposed to be? I'd say yes.
Real talk. The Padres were supposed to lose today's game with Pedro Avila pitching in Denver.
You're summoning the old scheduled loss.
They
argument.
won today's game and they lost yesterday's game. It's win distribution. They need to win 2 of these games. Everyone freaked out because they didn't win 4 in a row, but they won 4 out of 5. So,
but when are they going to win 4 in a row? Like,
later.
Happen?
Later. Later. Maybe this weekend. Later. Okay, later. Not now. But they won 4 out of 5. If they continue to win 4 out of every 5, they will win the world championship.
You said that. You said that in June about winning 2 out of 3. Craig, don't need to sweep anybody. They can win series.
It's still
this
true.
Is me moseying
all of it
into
remains
a volcano.
true.
I'm in a volcano.
They've won, but they've won 53 of their last 108. That's the problem, it's you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, we can slice it up however we want to slice it up, but they're still fucking under 500.
And yet, look, I said it on Twitter, I said it in our Discord, and I'll say it here. The smart, sensible, safe play was to give up on 2023, try and come up with the most attractive trade package possible for Blake Snell and Josh Hader. Consider a Seth Lugo move. Come up with some sort of straddle play like that. Get all the Buster Posies of the world and Kylie McDaniels of the world excited because we did the thing that the numbers said that we were supposed to do, and it wouldn't have comported with what the Padres' intentions are as a franchise this year. I freely admit that last Wednesday's game broke me. I freely admit that I was on group therapy and on Ben and Woods Thursday and Friday last week saying, find the package, sell, sell, sell. But then you and I, all three of us, were there Sunday evening. The Padres swept the Rangers. And I don't need to tilt against imaginary windmills. The Padres swept the Rangers. We all knew what that meant. We all knew that Snell was off the market. We all knew that Hader was off the market. So worrying about that potential opportunity cost is just going to drive you mad. It's truly a madman's voyage because there's no right answer. You can put anything into it that you want. You can take every loss from here to eternity and say, well, it would all have been different if we had only done this differently back at the trade deadline. That's not what this team was set to do. They went to add. And in doing that, I am not going to become a hypocrite and reverse myself. I asked them specifically to get a left-handed hitting DH, to get somebody for the back of the bullpen, to get somebody to help as a sixth starter, to eliminate Ryan Weathers, Reese Kinnear, Matt Waldron innings from this team, to eliminate Matt Carpenter and Nelson Cruz at bats from this team, and Taylor Colway at bats from this team. And that is literally and exactly what AJ Preller did today. In order to do that, depending on whose prospect ranking you want to go to, the very highest thing they gave up was Henry Williams, the 10th best prospect in the system. So that means the top 9 guys are still here. And this team is better positioned tomorrow than they were on Monday to go on this run. Very clearly, the next month will decide everything. In a week, the Padres can be out of it. Okay? In a week, in 2 weeks, the Padres can be done, dead, dusted, long shot, gone, and we're all going, opportunity cost, what we could have done. But it also could be completely the other direction. It could also be completely the other direction. The San Diego Padres are 2 games under 500, but they are 5 games out of a playoff spot. 5 games. They're 5 games out. They're 8 games out of the division lead. And this team has never, through 108 games, gone on one winning streak. One! Not even one goddamn winning streak. You're betting as an organization that 2 things are going to happen. That you're going to get marginally better to avoid the stupid gut punch, awful losses, to take all the schedule losses out of the remainder of the schedule, to avoid gut punches. And then you're betting secondarily that you're going to go on one streak of 6, 8, 10 wins in a row. Because that's all it's going to take. Because here's the thing, guys. This is truly the most important point. We talked about the schedule, and I'm talking about the schedule now. There are 3 straight weeks of 2-game swing games coming up for the San Diego Padres. Padres sweep the Dodgers. They're 4 games behind the Dodgers. Poof. They're 4 games back. Oh, well, they'll never do that. They're going to get swept. Da, da, da. Yeah, Padres get swept by the Dodgers. They're 12 games back. They're probably dead. Padres take 7 straight games from Arizona 2 and 3 weeks from now. Padres are 3 games ahead of Arizona. They're flying clear. They play Philadelphia. They play Miami. They play Milwaukee. They play all of these teams in the next month. So from an embrace the long shot, understand where the franchise is standpoint, I cannot complain one bit, not even one bit, about what the Padres did today. They did everything I have been pleading into this microphone for them to do for the past month. Is it going to work? Probably not. Probably not. Of course not. But that's why we should never get out of bed every morning.
Yes, sir.
That's why we should all submit to the fucking AI. Just give up. You're probably going to fail. No matter how much you try in life, you're probably going to fail and you're probably going to die. You're definitely going to die. So why do we try at anything? The Padres have said what they wanted to do from February 15th when they first showed up to today. Everything was of a line and was aligned today. I'm not going to complain about it one bit. You want me to make a guess? Fucking cue Tim Capello. Let's go. The iconic and universally acclaimed theme song.
Not universally.
I'm going to continue to I still believe this team can do it. And if they were going to get better today, it wasn't to get Justin Verlander and it wasn't to get Paul Goldschmidt. It was to get a bunch of fringe dudes like G-Man Choi and Scott Barlow. And I hope and pray that it'll work. But we're embracing the long shot. I still believe Tim Capello. Anything else, guys?
Go Padres.
Go Padres.
Go Padres.